Hello everyone, I am Sanjay Gupta. I welcome you on Sanjay Gupta Tech School. So today we are going to have day number 88 of this Salesforce Learning Bootcamp. And as you all know, like this week we are learning about how to become Salesforce QA and what all things we need to learn if we are going to work as a Salesforce QA. So this is part two of the session, and I have Irwin with me. So welcome Irwin on the platform, and
Thanks, Sanjay.
yeah, I appreciate your efforts. Like you are sharing your knowledge with the community. So thank you for that. So moving to next slide. Okay, so now I just want like Erwin, if you can introduce yourself with the community. So I know you introduced yourself in last session as well, but maybe we will be having some new folks joining today. So please introduce yourself so that they know who you are and what you are doing.
Sure thing. So, hello everyone. Even this, and as you know, that I'll be your host for the day with regards to the QA practices. And I'm someone who belongs to a non-technical background and who got introduced to Salesforce back in 2020. Got a little fascinated about it and gradually started learning it. And now I am working as a QA engineer. So with regards to Salesforce QA, I have an experience of 1+ years. The professional journey for me started 9+ years back as a nutritionist and a personal fitness trainer, which is yet going on. But on parallel, I'm also practicing the QA practice. And recently, I also launched my military podcast that goes by the name Present Talks. With that, I am also a certified administrator.
Great. So thank you, Irwin, for this. So moving on to the next slide. So this is our Telegram group. If you want to discuss any kind of doubt related to Salesforce, so you can join this Telegram group. Lots of folks are connected here. And in the next slide, I'm going to show you the timeline for upcoming weeks. So this week we'll be having 2 sessions on QA. Next week again 2 sessions, and next to next week we'll be having 2 more sessions, and then we'll be having some mock interview sessions, right? In which I will let you know like how, if you are a fresher, how you can introduce yourself, or how you can answer questions those are being asked. And if you are an professional working already with an organization and want to switch, so sometimes it is little bit tricky, like how to showcase whatever projects you have done. So that kind of things I will be doing for you so that you can learn. And if you want to follow those videos, so in next slide you can see like this Sanjay Gupta Tech School is available on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, Telegram. So you can join and follow, and all the important links are available in the video description, so you can follow. And next slide says like you can share your reviews or feedback about the bootcamp in the comment section or in on the LinkedIn, so that more folks can get benefited with the bootcamp, whatever I am doing for the community. And different speakers like Irwin is here, so people are sharing their knowledge for you so that you can learn and grow in Salesforce ecosystem, right? So with this, I just want to hand over mic to Irwin so that he can continue where we left yesterday, so that you can learn few more things. And if you have any question, just ask that in the chat, so that at the end of the session, like yesterday, Irwin answered all the questions. So today also, after completion of the session, he will be answering all your questions. Okay, over to you, Irwin. Please proceed.
Thanks, Sanjay. So, guys, today's topic is static testing. Static testing is, a type of testing where we are not exactly executing the functionality, but we are definitely trying to identify the errors in the software without executing the code. So it's generally performed in the initial stage of the software development to avoid defects, as it is easier to figure out the sources of failures in the initial phase of the development process. And in the latter phase, it's quite easy for us to get them fixed. Moving to the next slide, over here we'll be talking about static testing types. So the very first option is about informal testing. So when we talk about informal testing, we are actually talking about a document over here which has a list of contents jotted down, and we share it with a set of audience so that they can review and give their opinion on that. The reason behind having such an approach is in order to make sure that there might be some points which we must have missed. So in that case, they can cover those points. As we just for a quick example, when we look at the clouds, we might say that, oh, look, that cloud is very much, resembling to a horse. But a person coming there and might say that, on the horse's muzzle, there's a horn. That's actually a unicorn, not a horse. So in terms of functionality, if we are developing something, let's say we are talking about the functionality that we are creating a contact record from an account. We have the required fields on the layout of the flow, but we are missing some major fields which, if get missed in the future, can cause a big problem for the business. So in that case, our peers can help us in order to point that out and help us to also get that back on track without being missed. Next one is walkthrough. Walkthrough is basically done by some experienced professionals so that they can identify the defects without even executing the functionality, but definitely by going through the code. That experience comes with time because there are many scenarios which happens during the course of time which are recurring. Some are non-recurring but are very much expected. So having that eye of the analytical view and having that inquisitivity at that moment of finding out the defects and thinking of those vulnerable points of the functionality helps us in getting the defects detected earlier in the earlier phase. Next one is peer review. Peer review is basically, let's say we have jotted down a test case and we have a set of test cases as well. We ask our fellow QA to just go through the scenarios we have covered in order to make sure that if some important or even some less important aspects have been missed, those can be covered too. So this will only help us in order to increase our test coverage. Increasing of the test coverage also means that we have tested almost everything in the functionality. No stone has been left unturned in skipping anything that has not been tested. Last one is inspection. They are documents which are created with regards to what has been tested. Like we talk about sign-up documents, we have a test suite, we have a test plan. So when there's a test plan, we are definitely talking about n number of scenarios which have to be covered for a particular story or an epic or a task. So it helps us in order to make sure that nothing is missed over there as well. In a way, if I say in all these 4 points, we had one major point in common, that everywhere we are getting the things reviewed in order to make sure that nothing gets missed. That might, in the near future, cause a problem for the customer leveraging the functionality. Moving to the next slide, now comes the part where the functionality comes in action in a layman term. But if I talk technically, this is the time where we actually execute it. We execute the functionality, we look for the desired output with different kind of approaches. We also analyze the dynamic behavior of the code, and which basically moves on with the help of the input values that we are providing the fields with, the system with, and the output values that we are getting. Are they expected, or they are something which are completely unprecedented? Coming to the next part, it's basically that dynamic testing has its own types. So it's boundary value analysis, it's equivalence partitioning, it's decision table based, error guessing is there, and state transition is there. In each of these, we are approaching the functionality in a different manner. It also means that on one functionality, we cannot, apply all these testing types. There might be scenarios wherein just one can be applied. There might be scenarios more than one, or the third scenario can be all of them can be applied. So moving ahead, let's start with boundary value analysis. So in boundary value analysis, we basically check the valid value or invalid value partitions. In the next slide, I'll be sharing an example which will give you more clarity around it. We also make sure in this that the minimum or the maximum values are considered. The inside or outside values are considered. In many scenarios, there are some typical values with regards to some special characters being leveraged. So those are also checked. And at the end, we check for the error values. The main aim of having boundary value analysis is to check the fact that the kind of values which are expected for a particular field are being expected, and the ones which are not, our functionality is actually throwing us an error, stating that this is not a valid value. Also, the fact that it helps us, being a QA, to prepare a selection or a selected test cases with regards to exercising on some bounding values, because we know what is the criterion at that moment is for that functionality, and what are the valid values and what are the invalid values. Moving to the next part, that it's also part of the black box testing. As we discussed yesterday, black box testing is more or less wherein we are more or less concerned about the output and not how the code is being executed, what are the steps that are being performed in it. So just a quick review of what should be the guidelines of the boundary value analysis. So let's say there are values between X and Y. So the condition is restricted between them. So instead of X and Y, if I say it's just 1 and 10, so the values which are restricted to a limit is just between 1 to 10. We cannot have 0.99, which is smaller than 1. We cannot have 10.01, which is greater than 1. But it should be 1, 10, or either of the values that fall between that range. So if there is an input condition, where there's a large number of values, also with the fact that a number is greater than what was a normal number or the required number, in the technical terms, we call it the valid number, we get notified with an error message for that. Here comes the example when I said about having a range between 1 to 10. The basic test cases created for such a scenario is 0, 1, 2, 9, 10, and 11. 0 being the immediate previous number of the first value of our range, and 2 being the immediate next number or the latter number of our starting value of the range. And same goes for 9, 10, and 11. The other scenarios which come up over here is that considering that 0.99 or 0.50, though we are moving in decimals, but they are also values which are smaller than 1, and in a way should be tested, that the actual result of them should be that they are not accepted, and the error says that it's an invalid value for the input. Same goes for the scenario when we are talking about 9, 10, and 11. If we say it's 10.5, or if we say it's 10.75, even 10.01 should be considered as an invalid input. This is what we have stated for our values. Just a quick example for this. Let's take an example of reviewing someone. We said that we should only review between 1 to 5. And the person reviews someone as 6. So in that case, a validation error hits the user. stating that 6 is an invalid value which is lying outside the range. So in conclusion, I would say for this is that the aim is to only check the acceptability upon the acceptable range, which is considered or stated in the requirement by the customer. Next one is equivalence partitioning. In equivalence partitioning, we basically have a set of values between which there are acceptable values, but if we go on to the set of values which aren't stated as the valid ones, we get an error. Though we still create test cases around those in order to have a good test coverage and make sure that the values inputted there are considered as invalid based on the expected result. Example for this would be like we have two set of values, which is 1 to 10 and 20 to 30. So we can have scenarios like where we have like values lesser than 0, which can be in negative form, which will be an invalid set. We'll be having values which will be from 1 to 10, which will be valid based on our requirement. 11 to 19 again would be an invalid set of values, and 20 to 30 would be a valid set of values. So over here, our main aim is to make sure that the set of values mentioned there or the input which is being given to the fields should lie between these ranges, either of these ranges. Else we hit with a error message. Decision table based testing. So decision table based testing is basically getting the output from a functionality with a combination of inputs that we feed in. It's again a black box testing technique. We are not at all concerned about how the code is functioning, what are the steps that are being followed, but more or less the fact that there should be a desired output out of it, which is received. As you can see in the third point, it says that it's a cause or effect table. The reason behind of it being a cause or effect table is we have a combination in such scenarios, and if the correct combination is put in the fields, we do get the desired output, else we get a failure. So the very first task in such scenarios or such kind of testing is to identify the functionalities where the output is basically dependent upon the condition of inputs or the combination of inputs. So there can be large number of inputs as well, input combinations, which can be further divided into smaller subsets basis the category. So when we are creating test cases, we are testing, we categorize them. So here's an example for decision table based testing for you people. So let's say we are logging into some application and we are on the login screen and we take the very first condition wherein both our username and password are not correct. By the way, just giving you the quick overview. F stands for wrong username or password. H stands for home screen is displayed. E stands for error message is displayed, and T stands for correct username or password. Let's say in the first scenario, we have entered incorrect username and password. The output would be that we would be prompted with an error message stating that there is an incorrect password as well as a username. The correct scenario would have been we would have entered both the correct values in both the fields basically. In that case, we would have actually landed onto the home page of our application. The second scenario is we are inputting a correct value and the other value is incorrect. So correct username and the combination of the second half of it is with an incorrect password. In that case, again, we hit with an error message. The third one is we have just reversed it a bit. Now we are inputting a wrong username and a correct password. Again, the outcome remains something which is not acceptable. That is, we are getting an error message. The fourth scenario is the most desired one. That is, both are correct. That is the username and the password, and we are finally landing onto the homepage. So in this case, we are basically analyzing what combination fits the best for getting the desired output. So the output is completely dependent upon the combination of the inputs. Next one is error guessing. Error guessing testing is basically where the analytical thinking comes into the picture. So having that analytical thinking develop takes time. It comes on with experience, because being a software QA or a tester, the techniques one has to follow comes into practice in a good grip with time, and the ability to understand and to predict the kind of defects that can come out from a particular kind of a functionality takes time to get addressed as well as analyzed. So it's basically done by some experienced professionals, so that in the initial stage the defects can be identified, and in the latter stage we encounter lesser defects, and even if we get any kind of similar defect, it can be resolved very easily. So the purpose of error guessing in software testing is only to make sure that the person is able to analyze the possible bugs in the areas where the formal testing would not work. So it's all inclusive set of testing, and there might be some skipped areas, and there must be some redundant tests as well, which we are not creating, but we are actually analyzing them and getting them sorted in the initial phase when the product is in the development phase itself and has not landed in our plate, which is for the QA. Now, talking of the fact that the purpose of error guessing in software testing. So the purpose is clear, to make sure that, analyze the defects, have them sorted in the earlier phase. But the examiner, while using the experience, make sure these following points while performing this kind of testing, which is the tester's intuition that comes into the picture the foremost. As we discussed earlier, it comes with experience. They get to know what kind of a defect might come up. Even if not, they are very much capable of fetching out the defect from the functionality that is being developed. There is some kind of historical learning. Again, experience comes into the picture. There is a review checklist. When we talk about the review checklist is more or less about the fact that we are making sure of some major points that we have jotted down, and we are analyzing those first, or primarily, in order to make sure that the functionality is at least is actually acceptable basis those criteria. Next one is risk reports of the software. Every software has its own kind of a risk. Like risk, when I say risk, I mean some kind of failure or a defect or an error where the functionality breaks. Analyzing that in the earlier phase is very much helpful, because that prevents from a bigger failure in the future when the functionality is almost ready, tested, and is being handed over to the customer post UAT. So it's immensely essential to make sure that such risks are analyzed in the initial phase. Application and UI is again of utmost importance, because it helps us in order to make sure that the UI is user-friendly. If the UI is not presentable, 1, 2, it's not easily accessible, the user might not be comfortable using it. So it's very much important to make sure that the UI is a little presentable. Of course, not by presentable, I'm not at all intending to say that it's having some kind of pictures or something or logos, but definitely that it's so well organized that the person can navigate from one object to another easily. The next point, which is general testing rules, and the next point, which is previous test results, have the utmost importance again in the list because of the fact that the general testing rules also help us fetch those so-called probable defects or bugs. Previous test results can help us to compare the functionalities and help us to fetch out those results basis what went wrong back then and what we can do better now, or what was right back then and what is going wrong now. So it's more or less, in UI testing, we call it as A and B testing, comparing the two screens, basically before and after. So that's how we are basically comparing our previous test results with the current test results of a functionality. Again, talking about defects occurred in the past, it's more or less, we can call it as a sub testing part or a sub testing step of comparing the previous test results with the current testing results. And the last one is variety of data, which is used for testing. When I say variety of data, as we discussed yesterday, sample data plays a major role in testing a functionality, because when we are doing negative testing and positive testing, we are actually making sure that we are covering a good testing zone and good testing aspect of the functionality, so that we are not missing on the vulnerabilities of the functionality. Example is what I would say to be, let's say there's one bank account and we have deposited money, and the acceptable range over there is only 5,000 to 7,000. In order to check the right range, we would be inputting various values for that. For starters, we would be inputting 5,000. The second one most probably would be 7, and then we might go either greater than 7,000 or lesser than 7,000. Also the fact that we might input some values which are between this range of 5 to 7,000. At the end, the goal is to make sure that only the values that lie between 5,000 to 7,000 are accepted. Else, we should be prompted with an error that's an invalid set of values being populated in the fields. So as you can see over here, in this example, 6,000 got accepted, 555 got accepted, and rest all these, which were 4,000, 8,000, there was a blank value as well, there was 1,000 and dollar sign was there, 4,999.99 was there, which was not accepted. Now the question must be, if in the initial stage, when I said 5,000 to 7,000, why was 5,000.01 not accepted? It is because it is a scenario when we are checking that whether the decimal values are being accepted or not. In some cases, there might be an acceptance for the decimal values, but now that we're talking about money, we are not actually talking about cents. If it's dollars, right? We're just talking about dollars, which is $5,000. If you're talking about rupees, then in this case, it's only 5,000 rupees. It's not 5,000 rupees and 1 paisa. Therefore, we received an error message for this particular value. So whenever you're actually testing between ranges, you're moving between ranges, make sure that you're inputting a set of values and a variety of values that can help you in order to have a good test coverage. Now coming to the point that there's another kind of a testing technique which goes by the name state transition. So it's again a black box testing technique. And over here, our main intent is to check the behavior of the system or the application that has been built with different kind of input conditions. So it can be some random input conditions, both positive and negative, in order to break the functionality, just to make sure that the desired output is derived out of the functionality in both the cases, negative and positive. So example, I would say, supposedly we are logging into a functionality and we entered correct password and username for first 3 attempts. We were successfully able to log in. The expected outcome in the case where for the very first time we have entered a wrong username and a correct password, we get prompted for the wrong username. For the second attempt, we get prompted again. But for the third attempt, we get blocked. And the fourth, if we move on for the fourth attempt, it should prompt us to reset the password. So having different inputs on a regular basis and then making sure that the fact we are getting the acceptable or the desired output. That's where static testing comes. The state transition testing comes. So that was it for the day.
Okay, so I think we covered all the testing techniques, right?
Yeah.
Okay, guys. So we have couple of questions that I think you can answer. So first one is someone is asking dynamic testing. It's like functional testing or what?
It is very much similar to functional testing because over here we are more or less concerned about the fact that we want the desired output of the functionality that is being tested. So we are not at all concerned at the moment that how the code would go, but as we know as well that in functional testing, what we do is we provide the field with an input or the functionality with the input. We make sure that we are getting the desired output. Therefore, it's very much similar to it.
Okay. So next is Sudhir is asking BVA, ECP, and DTT are types of input domain coverage.
Yes. As I stated earlier, it is very much considered as the types of input domain coverage because we are checking the functionality or testing the functionality in different forms with different kind of values. At the end, our main aim is to break the functionality if possible, just with regards to the fact hitting its vulnerable points and checking that the functionalities dweller points must be working as expected.
Okay. So I hope Sudhir this answers your question, and I don't see more questions. So guys, if you have any more question, you can ask, or maybe if you are watching the recording and if you have any doubt, so in that case, like you can reach out to that Telegram group and you can ask questions there. There is one question. Can please explain state transition testing?
Okay. So, buddy, state transition testing is more or less like, we are testing a functionality and we are making sure that we are putting some random values for that functionality. And all our intent is to make sure that when we put in the right value, we should get the desired output. But before that, if there is a validation wherein inputting the wrong values could actually restrict us, we should be prompted with that expected result as well. So as I stated earlier, if I talk about logging into a functionality, if you log in with wrong password for the first 3 times, on the fourth attempt of yours, you will be logged out of logging in and you will be prompted with the error message to reset your password. Or in many instances, it's like they ask you to give a gap of at least 24 hours before logging back in. Wherein, in the positive scenarios, we would expect that when we are inputting the correct input username and password, we are able to log in and we are able to land on the home page directly right after hitting the login action. Also, just for your kind reference and example sake, I would also like to mention, let's say we are talking about the forget password option. We have clicked forget password. The correct behavior is that we should receive a mail with a link where we can navigate to, and we can reset our password. And whenever we log in the next time, the new password is accepted and not the previous one. In that case also, we can have a simultaneous input of values that will help us in order to check that whether the functionality is working as expected or not.
Okay.
I hope it answered your question.
Yeah, so I think I'm not sure what is your full name, so it is asked by AG. So I hope this answers your question. So there is one more question. So there is asking in account object there is 4-star rating. So what are positive and negative test cases for it? This is an interview question.
There's a 4-star rating on account object.
And we need to identify like positive and negative test cases.
Okay, so the first question, which comes up for this is that when you're saying 4 stars, in Salesforce, there is a functionality where we can actually use some kind of emoticons on it, right? If it's actually about stars, when it's 4, so is there a range specified for it? If there's a range like 1 to 4, then we have to make sure that boundary value analysis. Just for an example, we are taking that 1, 2 is acceptable, half star is not acceptable, or in many cases people give 3/4 stars as well, stating that 4.75. So it's 7.5. That should not be acceptable. Having stars more than 4, if acceptable, like if you can input that, but based on the expected result, it should not be acceptable. So that's where the negative parts of it come out. And for the positive testing points, all we'll do is we'll make sure that 1 is acceptable, 4 is acceptable, and any middle value is acceptable over there.
Okay, so I think Sudhir, this answers your question. Erwin, I don't see any more questions, so I think we can wrap the session here. Thank you so much for sharing the insights today. And guys, we'll be having 2 more sessions, but next week. So next week, Monday, Tuesday, again we'll be having 2 more sessions, and Erwin will share more insights about QA skill set in those sessions. Okay, so stay tuned for those, and details I will be updating in the session tracker, so you can just follow that. So again, I just want to thank Erwin. So thank you, Erwin, for sharing your knowledge with the community. And I can see there is huge response on yesterday's session. Like more than 800 folks viewed that stream, and I'm sure this will also cross that number. So it is very good, and I know like very less platforms are having information about how you can do proper QA in Salesforce ecosystem. So QA related sessions are available, videos, recordings are available, but specific to Salesforce, there are very less. So we are just targeting how you can become expert QA in Salesforce, right? So okay, so with this note, like I take your leave, and we'll be connecting next week for this session. And keep watching the videos. If you are not able to join live, do watch recording so that you can understand the concepts, because in QA practice, concepts are very much important, because if you know the concepts, then only you can work practically in this practice, right? So thank you, Irwin, and thank you everyone. See you Monday.
Thank you so much.